The sky was calm at first, soft sunlight filtering through the clouds, engines humming with quiet confidence. Nobody on that flight could have imagined how quickly peace could turn into chaos. But sometimes, life changes in a single heartbeat. And sometimes, the real war doesn't begin when you fall, it begins when you survive. Hey everyone, welcome to Swift Tale, where every story is more than just words. It's an emotion, a heartbeat, a lesson. If you're joining us for the first time, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss stories that touch your heart and test your courage. Because today's tale will make you question what survival really means. The story begins with Flight 729, an ordinary commercial flight carrying 56 passengers and a handful of crew members. There were students returning home, a young mother holding her sleeping child, a retired soldier staring quietly out the window, and a businessman nervously checking his watch. For a while, everything was perfectly normal: laughter, chatter, the soft clinking of coffee cups. No one knew that above the clouds, a storm was silently waiting for them. As the plane cut through heavy gray skies, turbulence began to shake the cabin. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but tight. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. We're passing through a rough patch." The lights flickered. The passengers exchanged nervous glances. Somewhere in that moment, between fear and faith, destiny shifted. When the first flash of lightning hit, time seemed to freeze. The engines screamed, alarms blared, and panic broke through the cabin. Mothers clutched their children, prayers filled the air, and every heartbeat echoed like thunder. And then darkness, silence. When they opened their eyes again, the world they once knew was gone. The plane lay broken across the frozen mountains, surrounded by endless white snow and brutal cold. Some had survived, but barely. The crash wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Because out there, in the heart of nowhere, the survivors soon realized something terrifying. Nature wasn't their only enemy. Hunger, fear, mistrust, and desperation began to take shape among them. That was when the real war began, not against the storm, but against themselves. So before we move forward, ask yourself a question. If you were one of them, stranded, injured, afraid, would you have the strength to fight for your life? Stay tuned, because this is only the start of a story that will test every limit of human survival and courage. The real war began after the plane crash, and you're about to witness how. The story begins hours before the crash, when everything still felt safe, normal, and almost beautiful. The airport buzzed with the familiar rhythm of departures and goodbyes. The smell of coffee, the sound of rolling suitcases, and the echo of flight announcements filled the air. People were smiling, taking selfies, talking on the phone, unaware that fate had already marked this journey as something unforgettable. Among the passengers was Maya, a young mother traveling with her 6-year-old daughter Leela. Her husband was supposed to meet them on the other side, and she kept texting him small updates. "Boarding now?" Leela's excited. A few rows behind her sat Captain Raymond, an off-duty military officer with years of discipline written in his posture. To most people, he looked calm, but inside, his eyes carried the weight of too many memories from too many wars. In seat 14B sat a man named Ethan Cole, dressed in a simple jacket, holding nothing but a small leather notebook. No one knew much about him, not where he came from, not why he was flying. He kept mostly to himself, occasionally glancing out the window with an expression that was neither fear nor peace, but something in between. As the flight attendants moved down the aisle offering snacks and drinks, the atmosphere was light. A newly married couple laughed quietly, a teenager listened to music, and the pilot's voice came over the speakers with a warm tone. "Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome aboard Flight 729. We're expecting a smooth ride today with just a few clouds ahead. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your flight." Outside, though, the weather was beginning to shift. Far in the distance, dark clouds gathered like a warning. But inside, no one noticed, not yet. The passengers talked about their plans, their dreams, their destinations. Each one carried a story, a secret, and a reason to live. That's what made the next few hours so haunting, because no one ever imagines that the person sitting beside them could be part of the last memory they ever have. Maya smiled as her daughter pressed her face against the window, whispering, "Mommy, we're flying above the clouds." Captain Raymond watched quietly, his mind drifting to his own daughter, long gone. And Ethan, He simply wrote something in his notebook, a line that would later become a haunting clue. The higher we go, the closer we get to the truth. The sky began to darken. The soft hum of the engines grew louder, and a faint vibration trembled through the floor. Some passengers looked up, confused. The flight attendants exchanged quick glances but continued their service, pretending nothing was wrong. And then, for just a moment, everything was still, peaceful, almost too peaceful. If someone had looked closely out the window, they might have seen the lightning flickering on the horizon, silent, distant, waiting. It was the kind of calm that only comes before a storm. In that moment, the narrator's voice fades in softly. Every journey begins with hope, but sometimes hope blinds us to the danger ahead. They didn't know it yet, but this flight was no longer a trip. It was the beginning of a battle for survival. The music builds slowly, strings, heartbeat like percussion. The pilot's voice returns, slightly strained this time. Ladies and gentlemen, we're encountering some unexpected turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. The camera pans across the cabin, mothers clutching children, travelers bracing themselves, the soldier gripping the armrest. And then, that sound, a sudden metallic groan from beneath the floor, followed by a flash of lightning outside the window. One heartbeat later, the entire plane shakes violently. Leela screams. A drink cart tips over. The oxygen masks drop from above. The cabin erupts in panic. And as chaos takes over, Ethan Cole closes his notebook slowly, looks toward the window, and whispers to himself, almost like he knew this was coming. "It's starting. Narrator." They thought they were passengers on a flight, but fate had just turned them into survivors and soldiers in a war they never signed up for. Storm came without warning, like a predator that had been waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The sky outside turned from gray to black. Clouds swallowing the horizon, thunder cracking like the roar of an unseen beast. Inside the cabin, fear spread faster than the turbulence itself. The plane shuddered violently, lights flickering, alarms screaming. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm." The captain's voice broke mid-sentence, drowned out by the roar of the engines. Oxygen masks dropped from above, swaying like ghosts in the dim cabin lights. People screamed, cried, prayed. A baby wailed in the back, and someone shouted for help. Maya clutched little Leela to her chest, whispering, "It's okay, baby, mommy's here, mommy's here." Captain Raymond grabbed the seat in front of him, steadying a panicked passenger while shouting, "Keep your head down." Ethan Cole sat still for a moment, too calm, too composed, his eyes locked on the window where lightning ripped through the darkness, revealing flashes of the mountain peaks below. Then came the sound no one forgets, the one that changes everything. A deep, tearing noise, like the sky itself splitting apart. The left engine exploded in flames. The entire aircraft lurched downward. Cups, phones, and luggage flew into the air. Passengers were thrown from their seats. A deafening silence followed for half a second, then gravity took over. The plane nosedived. Windows shattered. Screams filled the air as the cabin tilted into chaos. A flight attendant was thrown forward, hitting the aisle wall. Maya's seatbelt strained as she held her daughter tighter, her eyes locked on the soldiers across the aisle, and in that moment of terror, he nodded at her. A silent promise, hold on. Rain and hail lashed against the fuselage as the pilots fought for control. The altimeter spun wildly. The co-pilot shouted, "We are losing altitude, pull up, pull up." But the instruments were dead, the navigation systems useless, and visibility near zero. They were flying blind, straight into the heart of the storm. "Mayday, mayday, this is Flight 729, engine failure, uncontrolled descent." The radio cut out. The last words were swallowed by thunder. The mountain rose up from the mist like a jagged blade. Metal screamed against rock as the plane slammed into the slope, breaking apart in seconds. Wings tore off, fire erupted, and the world dissolved into sound and light. Then nothing. Silence. Snow fell softly through the wreckage, flames hissing against the cold. The wind howled through the torn metal, carrying with it faint cries, human voices, weak and distant. Hours passed before the first survivor moved. Captain Raymond crawled from the broken fuselage, his head bleeding, his voice hoarse. He looked around, bodies, fire, twisted seats, snow turning red beneath the wreck. "Is anyone alive?" he shouted, his voice cracking. From somewhere inside the wreckage came a faint reply, Maya, clutching her daughter beneath a collapsed row of seats. "Here, please, someone help us." The soldier forced his way through debris, pulling at twisted metal with frozen fingers. When he finally reached them, he saw Leela breathing, but barely. He ripped off his jacket and wrapped it around the little girl. "You're safe now," he whispered, though he wasn't sure it was true. A few others began to stir, dazed, bleeding but alive. Ethan Cole emerged from the shadows, dragging a bag that somehow survived the crash. His face was unreadable. When Captain Raymond asked, "How many?" Ethan simply shook his head. "Not enough." The snowstorm grew stronger, burying the wreckage inch by inch. The remaining survivors huddled together near the fire of what used to be an engine, trembling in silence. Their breath fogged in the freezing air, eyes wide with disbelief. No one spoke for a long time. No one needed to. The truth was written across every face. The flight was over, and rescue might never come. The narrator's voice fades in, deep and haunting. "Sometimes the world ends quietly, not with explosions or sirens, but with the sound of snow falling on broken metal. They survived the crash, but survival is never the end. It's the beginning of something far more dangerous." A close-up shot shows Ethan staring at the mountains beyond the wreckage, the wind biting his face. He opens his notebook again, his hands shaking, and writes a single sentence. "The war begins now." Narrator. They thought they had survived the impossible, but what awaited them in that frozen wilderness, hunger, madness, and the fight for humanity, would be worse than the crash itself, because the real war had just begun. When the storm finally eased, the world was unrecognizable. The once mighty aircraft now lay scattered across the mountains like broken bones. The fire had died out, leaving behind only smoke, twisted metal, and silence. A silence so deep it almost felt alive, whispering through the wreckage, crawling into every breath the survivors took. Captain Raymond was the first to move again. His uniform was torn, his hands raw from digging through debris, but his mind was focused on one thing, finding the living. "Check for anyone who's breathing," he shouted, his voice hoarse, echoing off the snow-covered cliffs. Maya sat near what remained of the fuselage, rocking little Leela in her arms. The child's face was pale, but her heartbeat was steady. Every few minutes, Maya glanced toward the sky, hopping, praying to see a rescue helicopter. But all she saw was endless gray. The reality was beginning to sink in. No one knew they were alive. No one was coming, not yet. Ethan Cole, quiet as always, began gathering what little he could salvage: half-burnt blankets, a few bottles of water, some packaged snacks. He didn't speak, but the precision in his movements felt almost rehearsed, like he had done this before. When Captain Raymond approached him and asked, "You okay?" Ethan simply replied, "I will be, if we stay calm." The survivors, 12 of them, huddled near the wreckage, using metal scraps and torn seats as makeshift shelters. The wind cut through their clothes like knives. The temperature dropped below freezing, and every breath turned into a cloud of white fog. The doctor, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Helen, tended to the wounded with what little she had: torn fabric for bandages, melted snow for cleaning wounds. Hours turned into a day, day into night. The hunger began to set in. They divided what little food was left: a few granola bars, 2 bottles of juice, and 1 small box of cookies someone found under a seat. It wasn't enough for one meal, let alone survival. Captain Raymond tried to stay optimistic. "Rescue teams will find the black box," he told them. "They'll trace our flight path, we just have to hold on." But Ethan wasn't so sure. "If the storm hit the radar," he said quietly, "we might be off the grid, we could be anywhere." His tone was calm, but his eyes, sharp and calculating, hinted at something darker. The nights were the hardest. The mountains came alive with strange sounds, cracking ice, howling winds, and distant echoes that no one could explain. Some said it was the wind. Others weren't so sure. They took turns keeping watch by the dying fire, the flickering flames reflecting the fear in their eyes. On the second night, one of the survivors, a young student named Rihin, didn't wake up. Hypothermia. They buried him beneath the snow with their bare hands. Maya whispered a prayer over his grave, her voice trembling. The silence afterward was heavier than before. It was Ethan who broke it. "We need to move," he said, staring into the darkness. "We can't just sit here waiting to die." Captain Raymond looked at him sharply. "We're not moving anywhere until we're sure someone's coming." Ethan didn't argue, but his jaw tightened, and in his eyes flickered something that looked like anger or truth. By the third day, the group began to fracture. Hope was thinning as fast as their food supply. Some still believed in rescue, others whispered about leaving the wreck to find help. Fear became their new language, quiet, constant, and contagious. Dr. Helen wrote in her notebook that night, "The body can survive weeks without food, but the mind breaks long before that." Maya sang softly to Leela, trying to keep her daughter from hearing the whispers of despair around them. The little girl asked, "Mommy, when will we go home?" And for the first time, Maya didn't know what to say. The snow fell again that night, heavier, colder. The wind howled through the wreck like a warning. Ethan stood at the edge of the wreckage, staring into the white emptiness of the mountains. His breath formed clouds that vanished instantly in the wind. Under his breath, he whispered, "This isn't just survival anymore, this is war." The narrator's voice fades in softly. They had survived the fall, but now they had to survive each other. Fear had taken root, and in its shadow grew something even more dangerous, doubt. As the fire crackled and the storm built again in the distance, Captain Raymond looked at his remaining group, shivering, hungry, broken, and said the words that would define everything to come. "Tomorrow we decide, do we stay or do we move?" The camera pans upward, snow swirling around the wreck, the faint outline of the mountains towering above. Somewhere in the distance, a single wolf howls. Narrator. They didn't know it yet, but their choices in the next few days would draw the first lines of battle. Because sometimes the fight for survival isn't against nature, it's against the people standing right beside you. By the fifth day, the mountain had swallowed hope. The snow no longer looked white, it looked cruel. Each gust of wind carried with it a whisper of fear, and every face told the same silent story: we might not make it. The survivors had stopped counting time. Their watches had frozen, and the sun, when it appeared, offered no warmth. Hunger gnawed at them constantly. The wreckage that once felt like protection now felt like a cage. Captain Raymond stood near the remains of the cockpit, staring at the horizon. "They should have found us by now," he muttered. His voice was cracked, heavy with exhaustion. "Maybe the signal's gone. Maybe we're too far out." Ethan Cole, who had spent the morning rummaging through the debris, finally spoke. "We're wasting time waiting here," he said, his tone steady but sharp. "The black box might not even be working. We need to move." A murmur spread among the survivors. Some nodded in agreement, others shook their heads. Maya looked terrified at the thought of moving her injured daughter through the frozen wilderness. "If we leave, and the rescue team comes, we'll die out there," she whispered. "But if we stay," her voice trailed off. Everyone knew what she meant. That night, the group gathered around their fading fire, the orange glow flickering on their hollow faces. The argument began quietly, but like the storm outside, it grew fast. Ethan stood up, his shadow long and sharp against the snow. "Every day we stay here, we lose another chance. There's a valley west of here, maybe 10 miles. If we reach it, we might find shelter or signal. Sitting here is suicide." Captain Raymond slammed his hand against the metal wreckage. "And walking into a blizzard with no supplies is, you think you can lead us through that storm?" Ethan's eyes didn't flinch. "I've survived worse." Silence. The fire crackled between them. For the first time, the survivors weren't just fighting the cold, they were fighting each other. Dr. Helen tried to mediate. "We are all scared," she said softly, "but fear won't save us. We need a plan, not pride." But the line had already been drawn. Half of them wanted to stay and wait for rescue. The other half believed leaving was the only hope. The unity that had kept them alive was unraveling thread by thread. That night, as the storm screamed outside, Ethan quietly began packing what little food remained. Maya noticed him and whispered, "You're really leaving, aren't you?" Ethan paused, looking down at the sleeping child in her arms. Someone has to try, he replied. If I make it, I'll send help. Captain Raymond woke later and saw Ethan's absence. His anger turned to dread when he found 3 others missing too, the young couple and a man named Karim. They had followed Ethan into the storm without saying a word. Morning came like a punishment, the cold sharper, the wind louder. The ones who stayed behind stared at the empty footprints leading into the white nothingness. No one spoke, but everyone wondered the same thing: had they made the right choice? As the days passed, the divide grew deeper. Those who stayed began to turn on one another, accusing, blaming, doubting. You said help would come, one man shouted at the captain. It's been a week, we're starving. The doctor snapped back, and walking blind into death will save you. Even Maya, who once prayed aloud for hope, had stopped speaking. She just held Leela close, whispering stories to keep her calm. But her eyes had changed, the light in them was fading. Then one night strange sounds echoed through the darkness, faint footsteps crunching in the snow. Everyone froze. The captain grabbed a piece of metal as a weapon. Who's there? He shouted into the blizzard. From the shadows emerged Ethan, or what was left of him. His face was pale, his hands trembling, his jacket torn. Behind him, no one else. He collapsed near the fire. They're gone, he gasped. The valley, it's not what I thought. There's something out there. Dr. Helen knelt beside him. What do you mean, something? Ethan's voice was weak but steady. I saw footprints, not ours, people or something like people, watching. A cold silence filled the air. No one dared to speak after that. The storm outside howled as if laughing at their fear. Narrator. Fear had taken shape, trust had frozen, and in the cold heart of the mountains, the survivors realized that the real threat wasn't the crash, or the storm, or the hunger. It was the darkness growing inside their minds. Captain Raymond looked at the group, shivering, hollow-eyed, broken, and whispered, almost to himself, the war's begun. The camera pans upward, showing the wreckage surrounded by untouched snow, while in the distance, a faint figure stands on a ridge, watching them. The next morning arrived with an eerie calm, the kind of silence that follows disaster but whispers of something worse. The storm had cleared, revealing a pale sun that did little more than mock their suffering. Snow stretched endlessly, glittering like broken glass. The wreckage, half buried, looked like the skeleton of a giant beast that had finally surrendered. Ethan sat wrapped in a torn blanket, his eyes vacant, staring at nothing. His words from the night before replayed in everyone's minds. There's something out there. Nobody wanted to believe him, but the fear was there, coiled in their chests like a frozen serpent. Captain Raymond gathered the survivors. His voice trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the weight of command. We can't stay here forever, he said. If rescue hasn't come by now, it's not coming. We move west. If we die out there, so be it, at least we die trying. No one argued this time. The wreckage was no longer a refuge. It had become a grave waiting to be filled. They packed what little food remained, 2 protein bars, a handful of nuts, and melted snow in plastic bottles. Maya tied her daughter, Leela, to her back with torn seatbelts, whispering promises she didn't believe. We're going home, sweetheart. Mommy will take you home. The group of 7 trudged forward through waist-deep snow, the wind slicing across their faces like shards of ice. Each step felt like dragging an anchor. Their breath came out in short, visible bursts, echoing in the stillness. Hours turned into days. The landscape refused to change, white, endless, merciless. At night they huddled under tree roots or beneath overhangs, their fire small and dying quickly. Hunger became a living thing, whispering madness into their ears. On the 3rd night, as they camped beside a frozen stream, Ethan woke to a sound, faint footsteps crunching snow beyond the trees. He froze, eyes darting toward the darkness. Who's there? He called out, but his voice cracked. The sound stopped. Only the wind answered. The next morning, strange tracks surrounded their camp. They weren't animal prints, they were human, barefoot. Dr. Helen examined them, her face pale. These are fresh, she whispered. Someone been watching us. Captain Raymond scanned the tree line, his jaw tight. Keep moving, don't look back. By evening, exhaustion set in. Maya stumbled and fell to her knees, clutching Leela. I can't go on, she cried. Ethan helped her up, his hands trembling from frostbite. You can, he said softly, because if you stop now, they'll find us. She looked at him, confused. Who? Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. The ones I saw. That night the temperature dropped below freezing. They built a small fire, but the wood was damp, and smoke filled the air. One of the survivors, Karim, began muttering to himself, his mind cracking under the strain. They're not people, he whispered. I saw their eyes in the dark. No one spoke. Fear was spreading like an infection. Later, as everyone drifted into uneasy sleep, Maya woke to a faint glow beyond the trees, orange, flickering, moving. She shook Ethan awake. Firelight, she whispered. Someone's out there. They followed it cautiously, hearts pounding. The snow crunched beneath their boots, the glow growing brighter. As they drew closer, the smell of smoke and meat filled the air. They reached a small clearing and froze. Around a fire sat three figures, their faces hidden by frost-covered hoods. On a makeshift spit above the fire hung something small and charred, too small to be an animal. The figures turned their heads slowly toward Ethan and Maya, eyes glinting in the firelight, not with warmth, but hunger. Ethan's heart stopped. He grabbed Maya's hand and whispered, "Run." They bolted through the snow, stumbling, gasping, their lungs burning. Behind them, footsteps followed, fast, heavy, relentless. The trees blurred past as they ran until they finally collapsed near the stream where the others waited. Captain Raymond pulled them inside the small tent of torn fabric they'd built. What happened? He demanded. Ethan could barely speak. People, he gasped, but not normal people. Maya clutched Leela, sobbing. They were eating something, someone. The group went silent. The doctor's eyes widened in horror. You mean? Yes, Ethan interrupted. The missing ones, the ones who left before us. The night stretched endlessly. Every snapping twig, every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. No one slept. By dawn, they decided to move again, deeper into the mountains, away from whatever haunted the forest. But the horror of what they'd seen followed them. It clung to their thoughts, whispering doubts. As they climbed a steep ridge, Ethan looked back one last time. In the distance, through the swirling snow, faint figures stood watching from the tree line, unmoving, silent. The blizzard eased by morning, leaving behind a silence so complete that every breath sounded like thunder. The survivors trudged forward, climbing higher into the mountains, unaware that they were walking straight into the heart of the nightmare. The air grew thinner, frost clung to their eyelashes, every step burned their lungs. Leela, the little girl, hadn't spoken since the night before. She just stared ahead with blank eyes. Maya whispered. By midday, they reached a ridge overlooking a vast valley shrouded in mist. Below, faint shapes moved, too organized to be animals. Smoke rose from what looked like a camp, with structures made from twisted metal and plain debris. Ethan's stomach twisted. That's part of our plane, he said, the tail section. Captain Raymond squinted. Maybe other survivors, maybe they built shelter. Dr. Helen's voice was low. Then why haven't they come for us? The question hung in the frozen air like a curse. As night fell, they made camp in a narrow cave. The walls were slick with ice, and strange marks were carved into the stone, symbols, circles, and names scratched in with trembling hands. Maya ran her fingers over one of the carvings. This is Arabic, she murmured. It says, forgive me. No one spoke after that. Ethan sat near the fire, staring into the flames. Those people down there, he said quietly, I think they were part of the first search team, the one that disappeared months ago. The doctor looked up sharply. You think this mountain has seen more than one crash? Ethan nodded slowly. I think it's seen too many. That night, the wind howled like voices. Faint whispers echoed through the cave, though no one dared move. Around midnight, Maya jolted awake. Leela was gone. Her scream tore through the darkness. Lila. Everyone scrambled outside, their torches flickering. Small footprints led away from the cave toward the valley below. Ethan ran first, his heart pounding. Snow lashed his face, But he didn't stop. They followed the prints for nearly an hour until the glow of fire appeared ahead, the same eerie orange light they'd seen before. The valley was alive. Dozens of figures gathered around a massive bonfire, their faces hidden behind makeshift masks made of metal and bone. They chanted in low, rhythmic tones that echoed through the mountains, and at the center, tied to a post, was Leela. Maya screamed her daughter's name and ran forward before anyone could stop her. Captain Raymond grabbed her arm, dragging her back. "You'll get us all killed." Ethan's eyes scanned the scene. "They're not rescuers," he whispered. "They're the ones who lost their minds." It became clear these were survivors from a previous crash. They had turned to madness, worshipping the mountain as a god that demanded offerings for survival. As they watched in horror, the leader of the group, a tall man wearing a pilot's jacket, raised his arms. His voice was deep, broken. "The mountain keeps what falls upon it," he declared. "To live, we must feed it." Maya broke free, sprinting toward Leela, screaming. The cult turned, startled. Ethan and Raymond charged after her. Chaos erupted. Screams filled the air as the fire roared higher. Ethan tackled one of the masked men, ripping off the mask, revealing a gaunt, frostbitten face with hollow eyes. Dr. Helen grabbed Leela and ran, her arms shaking. "Go, run," she shouted. Captain Raymond fought off another attacker, shouting, "Get to the ridge." The survivors fled through the snow, the cult's cries echoing behind them. Bullets whizzed past, scavenged weapons, crude but deadly. One hit Raymond in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Ethan dragged him up, shouting through the storm, "Keep moving." By the time they reached the ridge, only 4 of them remained: Ethan, Maya, Leela, and the bleeding Captain Raymond. The valley behind them glowed like a vision of hell. They collapsed inside a hollowed-out section of rock. The firelight flickered in their terrified eyes. No one spoke for a long time. Then Raymond whispered, "They weren't monsters, they were us, just people who gave up." Ethan stared into the distance, where the orange glow still pulsed faintly. "That's what this place does," he said softly. "It breaks you until you forget what it means to be human." Maya held her daughter tightly, her tears freezing on her cheeks. "I just want to go home," she whispered. Ethan looked up at the stars, faint, cold, indifferent. "Home isn't a place anymore," he said. "It's whoever's still breathing beside you." Storm returned 2 days later, colder, angrier, alive. Snow ripped through the air in spirals, turning the mountain into a white abyss. The 4 remaining survivors, Ethan, Maya, Leela, and the wounded Captain Raymond, moved slowly, clinging to jagged rocks to avoid being swept away by the wind. Each breath hurt. Each step was a decision between life and surrender. Raymond's wound had turned black around the edges, but he refused to stop. "Keep moving," he kept muttering. "We're not dying here." By dusk, they stumbled upon something strange, a half-buried structure made of rusted steel and glass. At first, it looked like more wreckage, but as Ethan brushed away the snow, the faint letters on the metal became visible. Arctic Research Facility, Project Mirror. The door was sealed shut, but the handle still worked. With one last shove, it groaned open, releasing a stale gust of air that smelled of chemicals and dust. They stepped inside. The darkness swallowed them. Ethan lit a flare, and the orange glow revealed a narrow hallway lined with broken computers, frost-covered walls, and faded papers scattered across the floor. A generator sat in the corner, covered in ice. "This place has power," Dr. Helen had once said about their plane's equipment before the crash. Ethan remembered her voice as he hit the switch on the generator. It sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. Lights flickered on, weak, yellow, ghostly. Maya gasped, What is this place?" The walls were covered in maps, photos, and files marked confidential. Ethan picked up one of the documents. It showed satellite images, strange energy readings, and coordinates, the exact coordinates where their plane had crashed. Ethan's hands shook. "This wasn't an accident," he whispered. "They made this happen." Captain Raymond slumped against the wall, coughing blood. "You're saying they shot us down?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Or they lured us here. Maybe the flight path was rerouted on purpose." They moved deeper into the facility. The rooms were filled with frozen equipment, medical pods, recording devices, and skeletal remains of people in lab coats. On a desk lay a single audio recorder. Ethan pressed play. A man's voice crackled through the static. "This is Dr. Lowell, Project Mirror Log 88. The experiment has failed. The mountain isn't what we thought it was. It's feeding on them. Every group we send ends up killing each other or disappearing. The energy field here distorts reality, time, memory, even thought. We can't leave. We are part of it now." Static, then silence. Aya covered Leela's ears, trembling. "This isn't real," she whispered. "This can't be real." Ethan looked at her, his eyes hollow. "It's real enough to kill us." As they explored further, they found a control room with a large window overlooking a massive pit, circular, metallic, and faintly glowing beneath the ice. The floor was cracked, as if something enormous had tried to escape. Raymond's voice trembled. What were they doing here? Ethan turned toward a wall lined with old photographs, dozens of faces, all labeled test subjects. And among them, their own. Ethan's picture, Maya's, even Captain Raymond. Maya stumbled backward. No, that's not possible. These photos are old." Ethan's voice was a whisper. "They were watching us before we even crashed." Suddenly, the generator flickered. The lights dimmed. A low rumble shook the floor. Somewhere below, metal groaned like a living thing. Leela started crying softly, and Maya clutched her clothes. A distorted voice echoed through the facility's intercom. "Phase 3 active." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Not human footsteps, slower, heavier, dragging. The temperature dropped instantly. Frost spread across the walls in seconds. Ethan turned off the light, motioning for silence. They crouched behind a broken console as something moved past the hallway, a shadow taller than a man, its skin pale as snow, its breath fogging the air. Leela whimpered, and Maya covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The creature paused, sniffed the air, then moved on, disappearing into the darkness. When the silence returned, Raymond exhaled shakily. "We have to get out of here," he whispered. Ethan nodded. "Not yet. We need to find an exit and proof of what this place really is." They split up, Ethan heading to the upper floors, Maya staying with Leela, and Raymond trying to restart the communications array. Upstairs, Ethan found a room labeled Observation Chamber 12. Inside, hundreds of monitors showed footage of the survivors, the crash, the fights, the panic, every moment recorded from impossible angles. He stared in horror. They were watching us the whole time. The screen flickered. For a split second, his own face appeared, but older, gaunter, staring directly into the camera. The monitor text read, "Subject 7, Ethan Cole, final phase incomplete." Ethan stumbled back, breath ragged. What am I?" he whispered. The floor beneath him rumbled again. A loud crash echoed through the halls, followed by Maya's scream. "Ethan, help." He ran toward the sound, sliding through icy corridors. When he reached her, Raymond was gone, dragged into the darkness, leaving behind a trail of blood. The creature roared again, closer this time. Ethan grabbed Maya's arm. "Run." They sprinted through the collapsing facility, alarms blaring, lights exploding. Metal doors slammed shut behind them. Ethan shoved open the final hatch and pulled Maya and Leela through. They emerged back into the blizzard, cold, blinded, alive. Behind them, the facility groaned one last time and collapsed beneath the snow, disappearing into the mountain's depths. They fell to their knees, gasping. The night sky shimmered faintly above, strange lights dancing in the aurora. Narrator, voiceover. They had escaped the mountain's mouth, but not its memory. The war they thought was over was only changing form. Ethan looked back at the mountain and whispered, "It wasn't the crash that brought us here, it was the experiment." The screen fades to black. The wind howls. The sound of static returns, followed by the faint voice from the recorder. The mountain was burning, not with fire, but with light. Strange, greenish veins pulsed beneath the snow, crawling like roots through the ice. Every few seconds, the ground trembled and a deep hum vibrated in the air, as if the earth itself was waking from a long sleep. Ethan, Maya, and Leela stumbled across a frozen ridge, the remains of the collapsed facility rumbling beneath them. Smoke and snow swirled together, painting the sky in hues of grey and blue. The world had become unrecognizable, broken, twisted, alive. Leela clung to her mother's coat, her tiny voice trembling. "Mommy, is the mountain angry?" Maya looked down, unable to answer. Because deep inside, she felt the same thing. The mountain was angry, and it wasn't done with them yet. Behind them, the ground cracked open. A blast of freezing air shot upward, and from the chasm, a sound emerged, not human, not animal, but something in between. The creature from the facility climbed out, dragging with it the remains of what once was Captain Raymond. His face was gone, but his uniform remained, a cruel reminder of the cost of survival. Ethan froze, pulling Maya and Leela behind a boulder. "It's following us," he whispered. "It wants us back." They started running again, their feet sinking into the snow. The creature moved slowly, deliberately, each step shaking the earth. Its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the green light beneath the ice. As they climbed higher toward the peak, the wind howled like 1,000 screams. The thin air cut their lungs, but they didn't stop. In the distance, the wreckage of their plane still sat half-buried, a reminder of where this nightmare had begun. When they finally reached it, Ethan collapsed beside the frozen fuselage. "We'll make our stand here," he said. Maya looked terrified. "Ethan, we can't fight that thing." Ethan's gaze was hard. "We're not fighting it, we're finishing it." He began digging through the wreckage, searching for the emergency flares and remaining fuel. His hands were numb, but he moved with purpose, driven by the same fire that had kept him alive through every impossible day. Maya held Leela close, whispering prayers under her breath. The sky above them darkened, auroras twisting violently, as if reality itself were tearing apart. The creature appeared again, dragging itself over the snow, its movements jerky and unnatural. Ethan tore open a metal case and found what he needed, a flare gun and 2 red sticks of emergency explosives. "If this thing came from the mountain," he said, loading the gun, "then we bury it there." The creature let out a piercing shriek, and the sound split the air like thunder. Ice shattered, trees snapped, the mountain roared back in response. Ethan fired the first flare. It struck the creature's chest, lighting it ablaze in red light. It screamed but didn't stop. It charged forward, faster now, furious. Ethan yelled, "Maya, run." But Maya didn't move. She stood her ground, holding a metal pole like a spear. "You're not taking my daughter," she screamed, swinging with all her strength. The pole connected with a sickening crack, but the creature barely flinched. It grabbed her by the arm and threw her into the snow. Ethan lunged forward, tackling it with all his weight. They rolled through the snow, Ethan punching, clawing, screaming. The creature's face, a distorted reflection of a human, stared back at him. For a moment, he saw something horrifying, his own eyes. He gasped, realization dawning. The mountain wasn't creating monsters. It was replicating them. "Project Mirror," he whispered. "It's me." The creature's jaw opened, and Ethan saw flashes, memories that weren't his, screams from earlier survivors, faces of those who'd perished. It wasn't just a monster. It was a vessel of every soul the mountain had consumed. He pushed back, grabbing the flare gun and pressing it against the creature's chest. "You want to survive," he shouted. "Then take this." He fired. The explosion threw both of them backward, the snow erupting in flames. Maya grabbed Leela and shielded her as the wreckage ignited, lighting up the mountain like a beacon. Ethan struggled to his feet, coughing blood. The creature writhed in the fire, its skin melting, revealing flashes of human faces screaming within it. He stumbled toward the plane's cockpit, dragging the last explosive behind him. He looked back at Maya, their eyes met, full of everything they could never say. "Go," he said softly, "get her off the mountain." "No," Maya screamed, "you'll die." Ethan smiled weakly. "Someone has to make sure it doesn't follow." Before she could stop him, he ran into the wreckage, sparks flying around him. The creature lunged one last time, and Ethan ignited the fuel line. The explosion ripped through the sky, echoing across the peaks like thunder. A column of fire rose from the wreckage, and the creature's scream was swallowed by the blast. Maya fell to her knees, clutching Leela, sobbing as snow and ash rained down. The mountain roared one last time, then went still. Silence, only the crackling of burning metal remained. When the smoke cleared, the sun began to rise, pale, cold, beautiful. The mountain, once a monster, was calm again. Maya looked up at the light and whispered, "He did it." Leela held her mother's hand and asked softly, "Mommy, can we go home now?" Maya smiled through her tears. "Yes, baby, we're going home." As they began their descent, the wind carried faint echoes, Ethan's voice, distant, calm. Survival isn't about escaping death. It's about facing what you become when it finds you. Narrator, voiceover. The mountain kept its secrets, but one man's sacrifice broke its curse. The war that began after the plane crash had finally ended, not with victory, but with peace bought in fire. The sun rose slowly over the shattered peaks, its golden rays touching the snow as if healing old wounds. The once furious mountain now lay silent, calm, majestic, almost holy. What was once a battlefield had turned into a resting place for heroes. Maya and Leela moved down the ridge carefully, their clothes torn, faces smeared with soot and tears. Each step away from the wreckage felt heavier than the last. Behind them, smoke rose from the crater where Ethan had made his final stand, the last trace of the man who refused to surrender. For a long time, neither spoke. Only the wind whispered through the trees that had somehow survived the storm. When they finally reached the lower valley, Maya collapsed onto her knees, clutching Leela close. She looked back at the mountain, her eyes glistening. "He did it," she whispered. "He really did it." Leela, still too young to understand the full weight of what had happened, touched her mother's face. "Will Daddy come back?" she asked softly. Maya's heart broke all over again. She smiled through the pain. Brushing her daughter's hair back, "He's not gone, sweetheart. He's part of the mountain now, watching over us." They found a frozen river and followed it downstream, the sound of rushing water giving them like a heartbeat. The snow was melting faster now, as if the mountain itself was finally exhaling after years of holding its breath. Hours turned into days. Their strength waned, but hope kept them moving. Eventually, a rescue helicopter appeared in the distance, a red dot against the endless white. Maya waved a torn piece of fabric, shouting until her voice gave out. The helicopter circled and descended. The rescuers ran toward them, wrapping blankets around their shoulders. "We found survivors," one shouted into his radio. "Repeat, we found survivors." As they were lifted into the helicopter, Maya looked out through the window. From above, she saw the burned wreckage, the strange patterns of green light fading slowly into the snow. Whatever secret the mountain had held, it was dying with the fire. Inside the helicopter, a medic checked their vitals. "You're lucky," he said. "We thought everyone was gone." Maya just nodded. "Someone made sure we were." When they landed back at the base camp, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, voices shouting. Maya didn't speak a word. She just held Leela tight and stared at the horizon where the mountains still stood, silent and eternal. Days later, when the authorities sent a team to investigate the crash site, they found nothing but ash and melted steel. No bodies, no evidence of any creature or experiment. Just a single flare gun buried in the snow, its metal burned but intact, a symbol of defiance against nature itself. Months passed. Maya and Leela started over in a quiet town by the sea. Leela went back to school, her laughter slowly returning. But sometimes, at night, she would wake up crying, saying she could still hear the wind whispering her father's name. Maya would hold her close and say, "That's not the wind, baby. That's him telling us he's proud." One evening, as the sun set over the water, Maya stood on the shore holding Ethan's old compass. The needle spun wildly for a moment, then stopped, pointing not north, but toward the mountains far beyond the horizon. She smiled. "I know," she whispered. "We made it." Narrator, voiceover. The real war was never against the mountain, the storm, or the creatures in the dark. It was against despair, the kind that takes your will to survive. But as long as even one flame burns, hope will rise again. The camera pans out, Maya and Leela walking along the shoreline, hand in hand, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. As the waves crash softly, the words fade onto the screen. Dedicated to all who fight unseen battles and win. Narrator closing line with swift tail outro. This was the real war began after the plane crash. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because at Swift Tale, every story we tell is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, light always finds a way.